Out of the entire squad that's chillin' in God U, Emma Meyer is the one to whom our heart goes out the most. That's because we can relate to her on a personal level. She's clumsy, she's spunky, she's a little bit all over the place, but she always wants to do what's right, and she isn't afraid of talking back to people who can kill her pretty easily. Yet, what makes Emma the most relatable to us is her superpower. Now, you might be thinking that's some BS because we don't have any superpowers ourselves. To that, we say, stick around until the end of this video and you'll see what we mean. This is Emma Meyer / Little Cricket's Anatomy Explained. Oh, and before we get into this explanation, we do have a very quick request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to the channel. It's a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. She's like Ant-Man, but without the PIM particles. Emma's size-shifting abilities. Most soups in the boys' verse are darker reflections of comic book superheroes. A-Train is what the Flash would be if he were a Velocity 9 junkie. Homelander is basically Dictator Superman without the love of his parents, and Emma Meyer is the Ant-Woman of the franchise. Or technically Stature, Ant-Man's daughter, if you really want to get into gendered accuracy. But unlike most shrinking superheroes, Emma doesn't use an external agent to regulate her size. We know that size shifters often use some sort of molecular distortion to activate their powers. Ant-Man has his PIM particles, which allow him to shrink to the size of an ant, hence the name. He can also reach the size of a subatomic particle, which gives him access to the microverse. He can also reverse the shrinking wavelength of the PIM particles to grow 50 feet tall, which is when he becomes Giant Man. In DC Comics, the Atom uses the power of a white dwarf star to activate his size-shifting abilities. Because the Atom's powers affect things on an atomic level, he too can enter and exit a subatomic state of existence, and as a bonus, he can phase through objects by changing his body's molecular structure and even blast people with his white dwarf star belt. The Atom can also control his body mass at any given point in time, which makes him a major problem because he could be the size of an ant and yet have the strength of an elephant if he so desired. Both Ant-Man and the Atom go on adventures that heavily involve the use of technology, but Emma's powers are different. That's actually seemingly dependent on the number of calories she has in her body at any given time. When we're introduced to Emma, we're told that she becomes Little Cricket when she purges. Purging is the act of voluntarily inducing vomiting to get rid of the contents of your stomach in the worst way possible. Purging is usually associated with eating disorders and drinking. And trust us, Emma loves to drink, but that's not why she pukes her guts out every time she needs to use her powers. She does it because she thinks it's the only way to shrink or grow, and growing takes the opposite route to shrinking in her books. If she has to get rid of calories to shrink, then she needs to eat an insane amount of food to grow back to normal size. And if she wants to break the size barrier and become massive, she needs to eat even more. So, from a biological standpoint, it seems as though caloric intake forms the basis for Emma's soup abilities, which makes a certain amount of sense. Many soup powers in the boys have activation conditions, like Kate needing to touch people to influence their minds, or Jordan needing to be in their female form to access their force field blasts. It wouldn't be too shocking if Emma had similar activation conditions, and calories being tied to her powers is odd, but kind of fitting considering that she has the same mom as Starlight. But here's the thing, purging and eating like a Saiyan aren't the activation conditions for Emma's abilities, they're reflective of a larger mental health issue that lurks in the back of Emma's mind all the time, and the reason for that is her pageant mom, whom we just mentioned. Emma's eating disorder is not an activation condition. When we first saw Gen V, we thought Emma's power activation ritual was disgusting, yet necessary. At the time, caloric intake was what we thought served as the basis for her shrinking and growing, so it made sense that she had to puke to keep her YouTube channel alive. But as the series progressed, we realized that's not the case here, and that Emma is actually suffering from a disease called bulimia. Bulimia is a condition where people intentionally overeat and then purge to maintain their preferred body weight ratio. This condition is most commonly found among individuals who work in a line of business where appearances matter a lot, like modeling or acting, but it can also affect anyone who's obsessed with having the quote-unquote perfect body. British psychiatrist Christopher Fairbairn's cognitive behavioral model is considered to be the golden standard for understanding why individuals get afflicted with this disease, and Emma's interactions with her mom fit that model's diagnostic criteria perfectly. By now, every character in this franchise is aware of the fact their parents shot them up with Compound V to make a quick buck off of them. It's actually a major plot point in Gen V where we see several of the main cast of characters openly despising their parents for exerting this amount of control over their lives, and yet refusing to take responsibility for any of it. Kate's parents agreed to give her superpowers, but then locked her up in a room and treated her like a freak when she accidentally used her powers on her younger brother. Jordan's parents are, generally speaking, proud of them, but they love them more when they're a him and not when they're a she. In fact, Jordan's parents actively despise them in their female form, which is quite unjust considering they were the ones who chose to give Jordan V. This problem isn't limited to the cast of Gen V, because Starlight is perhaps the most glaring example of a soup who disowned her parents for turning her into a show pony. When she was young, Starlight's mom would make her sign up for all these pageants and talent shows for soups, and she'd have her train vigorously, often at the cost of her health. Starlight's costumes would be too tight and uncomfortable for her to perform in, but she'd tough it out by clenching her fists really hard because that's what she had to do to please Mother, and it was only after the news about Compound V broke that she was able to finally confront her mom and break off their toxic relationship for good. Emma's in the same boat as Annie, except unlike Starlight, she was never going to be on track to join the Seven. Fighting crime is a privilege reserved for heroes with the most unique of powers, and most soups in this franchise end up getting into performance arts. From the day Emma discovered her abilities, she knew she'd be on the performance arts track because, realistically, a soup who shrinks after puking wouldn't be too useful in a combat scenario. So her mom pushed her into becoming an influencer, and that was the beginning of her eating disorder. We see Emma's mom at least a couple of times in Gen V, and it's clear from the conversations they have that her mom is the source of her bulimia. I mean, Emma's mom keeps track of her weight like it's a stealth fighter deployed for a secret mission, and even after she becomes successful, she still doesn't stop harassing her daughter. Fairburn believed that bulimia's onset conditions were low self-esteem and caving to societal pressure, because once you agree that being thinner and looking better are more important than living a healthy life, it's game over for you. Emma's low self-esteem was clear from her Amazon bio before Gen V even began, where they described her as someone who needed to be liked by everyone around her. And because she was forced to do these things by her mom of all people, she can't even say she's bulimic by choice, because we know she isn't. In fact, her purging is such a problem that even a stuck-up soup like Polarity, who was portrayed as an elitist in season 1 of Gen V, becomes super concerned when he sees Emma fill 3 trash cans with her vomit to get back to regular size. We'll get to why she needed to throw up that much in a few moments, but we're saying all this to impress upon you the fact that Emma's abilities are in no way connected to calories. Her bulimia acts as a trigger because her mom forced her to be perfect, and for most of her life, Emma believed she would never escape that cycle. Fairburn described bulimia as a self-perpetuating disease because usually bulimic folks follow strict dietary regimens. It's only when they slip and overeat that the purging becomes necessary, but then they go back to the diet, slip again, purge again, which creates this vicious cycle of eating and expelling. We've seen Emma do this many times in the series because of the way her mom conditioned her since a young age, and considering Marie's powers were also triggered by self-harm, aka cutting her palm open, we figured this was Gen V's commentary on the abhorrent nature of Compound V. But Season 2 has shown us that most soups completely misunderstand how their powers work, and as it turns out, Marie doesn't need to cut herself to control blood. She only did that as a coping mechanism because she had a rough childhood, to say the least, but Season 2 confirmed that the hand cutting wasn't an activation condition many times over. Emma's the same way, and in fact, we saw her use her powers without her perceived activation condition in Season 1 as well when she needed to protect someone. In fact, much like Marie and Kate and Jordan, it seems as though Emma's powers are actually linked to her unconscious desire to do things, and if she concentrates and really hones in on what she wants to do or how she feels about something, that's when the true potential of her abilities will start to emerge. She gets smaller when she feels small. Shrinking Spy Emma explained. Emma's powers can be explained through a psychodrama technique that involves self-perception when compared to the obstacles we face in life. This technique asks the patient to visualize themselves and the people or problems that are plaguing them. The size of the patient's fears often towers over their self-perception, and that's how Emma's shrinking abilities actually work. She doesn't shrink because she throws up, she shrinks because she feels small, and because she feels like running away from everything. In Season 2 of Gen V, Emma becomes friends with Harper, a soup student who can copy someone else's abilities for 60 seconds. When Harper mimics Emma's abilities, Emma becomes dejected because this girl she barely knows can use her powers better than she can. Harper tries to help her replicate those results by taking her to a theater class and working on quote-unquote feeling smaller, and Emma does admit that when she purges, she feels like crap about herself. So if we connect this to the psychodrama technique, we come to the realization that feeling small is actually what causes Emma to shrink, not expelling calories, and we actually see this play out a bit in season 1. When Sam decides to become a supremacist, he berates Emma for helping him because he knows she did it for some self-serving reasons. Afterwards, we see Emma shrink, but there's not a speck of vomit around her. Sam made her feel like crap with her words, and so her size reduced to match her self-perception, which is the true trigger for her powers. This also explains why she shrinks more than she grows, because usually Emma feels like crap. She's been raised as a show pony by her mom, forced to fight her pet gerbil on her YouTube channel called Fun-Sized with Little Cricket, and even her soup name is a shot at her abilities. Emma's life felt like crap most of the time, and we're willing to bet that she's wanted to run away and leave everything behind on multiple occasions. Living with that kind of fear on a daily basis can be extremely debilitating, but in the right situation, it could make the difference between life and death. Feeling small is primarily connected to fear and self-loathing, but fear is a more powerful motivator. If she ever feels like she's stuck, she can just shrink and make her escape without people realizing where she's gone. And in fact, Emma has used her shrinking for espionage on a few occasions in Gen V. The first was when she snuck into the woods and broke Sam out of there, and while that was brave of her, the whole time she was afraid of getting caught and killed, or worse, branded as a public enemy by Vought. Then in season 2, we see her planting a camera in Cypher's VIP box during the match between Jordan and Marie, and while the overall objective of the mission failed, Emma performed her part flawlessly. Her shrinking also doesn't diminish her strength as much as you'd think, because Emma can burst through an ear canal just fine, even as Little Cricket, and though she won't be able to throw down with Homelander, she can leap away from him, far out of his line of sight. Emma's shrinking abilities make her the perfect spy in some ways, and we're sure that if she was more confident of herself, she'd have signed up for crime fighting instead of performance arts. Especially because, while shrinking gives her the perfect escape route, her enlarging makes her a formidable opponent. So formidable that as Giant Emma, she could potentially fight Homelander and not die in the process. This also circles back to the psychodrama technique we mentioned earlier, because if she shrinks by identifying with and wanting to escape her problems, then it only makes sense that she'd grow big by doing the opposite. She gets bigger when she wants to protect. Giant woman Emma explained. In the aforementioned technique, the way to beat one's fear is to simply increase one's own size to outsize whatever plagues them. You'd think that shrinking the problem to be smaller than oneself would be efficient, but that's simply not how the mind works. Problems don't become smaller or bigger, they are perceived as such by our experiences, and to shrink down a problem would be tantamount to trivializing it. Instead, a patient is told to increase their own self-perception so that in their visualization of their fears, they become larger than the fears ever were. True strength comes from within, and it can only be unlocked by believing in oneself, which is the foundation for being healthy in the first place. You can't hope to beat your fears if you don't want to. It's only by becoming bigger than them in your head that you can even begin to do so in real life. Positive self-perception and the confidence to take care of not only yourself, but those you love and the things you care about as well, these are crucial to becoming larger in your own mind. And that's exactly how Emma triggers her giant woman transformations. In season 1, we saw her eating a bunch to get bigger, and her size was impressive, not gonna lie. She became as big as a 2-story building, and the fact that she was able to restrain Sam's strength, who has been proven to be one of the physically strongest soups in the franchise, was a major thing. But in season 2, Emma's size increases on its own when she discovers the Odessa files in Thomas Godolkin's secret archive and realizes that Marie is Odessa. That entire sequence, where she helps Polarity gain access to God-Use high-clearance archives, proves to her that she can, in fact, be useful. I mean, it was Emma's familiarity with the Custodians TV show that got them into that section in the first place, and not only did she discover the secret room, something even Polarity with his mental powers couldn't, she also found Vought's dirty little secret. Emma was overjoyed by how she got big on her own, to the point that she didn't really care about her body being fully naked. But even if she didn't understand how it happened, she at least gets that her sense of having achieved something meaningful was what triggered it. Or rather, we hope she does, because her discovering the Odessa files is proof that she's more than just a YouTube influencer. This was probably the first time in the entire run of Gen V that Emma Meyer actually felt useful, felt like a superhero, and that's the real trigger for her becoming Giant Woman. It's when she feels bigger than her problems that she actually gets big, and like Giant Man, Emma's physical strength increases with stature. But the real issue here is we understand how Emma's abilities work. There's a complex anatomy/psychology thing going on here with an eating disorder thrown into the mix for good measure. But is there a world where she'll be able to gain perfect control of herself and break out of her vicious bulimia cycle? Well, we can't be sure, but we can say this. If she does learn how to shrink or grow on command, she'd become one of the most versatile supes in the world. Everyone remembers that airport fight in Germany from Captain America Civil War, but what most people might overlook is the fact that Ant-Man was kind of the central figure in it. He was chosen specifically because he could shift sizes fluidly, and he was the only one who could take out Iron Man and War Machine without raising too much suspicion. In a battle, the moment your enemy reads you, you have only two choices left: adapt or die. But Tony didn't realize his suit was malfunctioning because of Scott until the malfunctions began, and given the fact that he can shrink down to Ant-Man's size, Emma can probably do the exact same thing if she were in the exact same situation as well. Ant-Man also became Giant Man temporarily to stop War Machine from pursuing his allies, which was critical to Steve and Bucky's own pursuit of Baron Zemo. If Scott hadn't distracted Iron Man's team, Cap would have never made it to the jet, and Emma has the potential to do both of these things just as flawlessly as Scott Lang did. The only difference between them is the fact that she doesn't have to use Pym particles or worry about running out of them in the middle of a fight to use her powers. She can just switch between mental states and keep doing that endlessly, or at least in theory. That theory also requires her to have perfect control over her own feelings, which is kind of ironic, considering perfection is what got her stuck in her bulimic loop in the first place. But all Emma needs to do is accept herself for who she is and accept every single part of herself without reservations, because that's so easy, right? But I mean, fighting any problem requires that you accept the fact that you're in trouble in the first place, because staying in denial mode will never allow you to come up with solutions. Denial is a disease in and of itself, so by accepting her emotions and letting them flow in accordance with her will, Emma should be able to understand how Harper used her powers better than her. And maybe she'll even reach a point where she can rival Ant-Man and the Atom as a size-shifting superhero. Minus traveling across dimensions and microverses, of course. Marvelous verdict! But as for this video, we're afraid that's all we got for you guys, so let us know what you think about the anatomy of Emma Meyer / Little Cricket down in the comments section below. While you're down there, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more Gen V and The Boys content, and we'll see you guys real soon with another hero-gasmic video. Bye-bye!